Hi, it's Sarah here and welcome to my channel. In this video, I am so excited because we are doing our end of year book tag. We're going to go over all the books that I read, well, most of the books I read in 2024. I so far actually have read 61. I'm thinking that I'm going to end out the year around 65, but I am filming this like a little earlier in December, so we'll see by the time I actually get to it. If you're curious to see how many I do end up reading, you can follow my Goodreads or my Instagram, which are both linked in the description below. We're also going to talk about the books that I want to read in 2025 and just like any challenges or goals that I have for myself. I have a giant stack of books next to me, and I also have a notebook tracking all the things that we're going to talk about. So let's get started with the happiest book that I read. Honestly, I didn't read a lot of happy books. I end up reading a lot of dark books. That's what my story graph stats have told me. But the happiest one I think of the happiest book that I can think of that I read is A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is book 3.5 in the ACOTAR series. And it is such a sweet book that ends right after all of the craziness that happens in the third book. And it's just a short novella. It's under 200 pages, I'm pretty sure. And it's a really sweet, it's 233 pages. It's just a really sweet, happy book, basically. There's a couple things in there that aren't super happy, but I mean, you can't have a good story if there's nothing that's like a little bit sad or intense or whatever. So it was a great book. I actually rated it 5 stars because sometimes you just really need that. I think it was 5 stars because of reading it right after ACOTAR, and it's a very nice holiday themed book. I actually would love to read it again in the holiday season. The next book we have is the most overhyped book that I read, and I don't have this book anymore because I gave it away since I really didn't care about it, but it was The House Across the Lake, and I had higher hopes for this book. I ended up rating it 3.75 stars, which is not bad by any means. But I honestly thought it was going to be like a 5-star book for me, so when I expected that and then it wasn't, it was quite disappointing, honestly. And I just didn't, I think, expect the paranormal aspects of it, and I didn't love the storyline, and some things were confusing to me and seemed really odd. And then sometimes it was also pretty good at the same time, so I would still recommend reading it, but I wish that I had lower expectations for it. The most disappointing book I read in 2024 is one that some people might get upset at me for, but it is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. And the reason it was the most disappointing is because I had heard so many good things about this book. Stephen King himself said this is probably the scariest book he's ever written, and it didn't scare me, and I get scared pretty easily. And so I was shocked that I didn't really get scared. There's some things that are definitely creepy or things that are gross or things that are kind of scary, but I didn't feel scared. Like I was like fully expecting to have to read this with the lights on, not at nighttime, like all that kind of stuff. And it didn't end up really mattering. Like I did end up reading it more during the daytimes, like on the weekends and stuff. But still, it was not what I had hoped or expected. I also have never seen the movie, so I didn't know that everything basically happens at the end. And the rest of it is just kind of random stuff that keeps happening. So definitely disappointed, but I do love this copy. It's torn here and here, and it's torn here because it's such an old book. I can't remember now off the top of my head. I'll put it down here if I can find it, but yeah, the copy is pretty cool. The most frustrating book that I read was Before the Coffee Gets Cold. And I also gave this book away because I really didn't enjoy it. I rated this one 3 stars, which some people say in the 3-star range is still pretty good, which I would say around 3.5, 3.75 is not bad. But once I hit the 3-star mark, for me personally, I'm not really going to read anything much lower than that. I did have one book that I rated 2 stars this year, but that's because I hated it. But most of the time I'm going to DNF it if I hate it that much. But this one, I just did not enjoy it. I didn't really like the story. It was frustrating because I didn't agree with a lot of the choices that were being made or the way things were being handled, and it was just frustrating not getting information, and I just did not enjoy it at all. An underdog book that I read this year is How to Solve Your Own Murder. This one I rated 4 stars, and it It was so good. I did not expect it to be this good. I think it's rated within the 3-star range on Goodreads, and I was impressed. Like, I thought pretty highly of this book. Like, I really enjoyed it. I thought the mystery was fun. There was maybe a couple things here or there that I didn't love, but that's why it's not a 5-star book. And it was interesting enough that I wanted to keep reading it. I wasn't like, I have to read this now, but like, I wanted to keep reading. And I think that this book deserves to be rated a little higher than it is. And I have heard good things from some people, but a lot of people I feel like I haven't seen actually have read this book. Maybe I'm just not seeing the right places or the right people, but I had a few people comment on it when I posted it on Instagram and Threads, and they had said that they really liked this book, and I totally agree with them. So next we have the longest book that I read, which is A Promised Land by Barack Obama. So page-wise, this one's actually only 701 pages. I have read books with more pages than that, but they're not hardcovers and they're not as big as this. Like, I mean, this is literally bigger than the size of my head. And the audiobook itself is what I actually listened to, and it was 29 hours, which is the longest audiobook that I listened to this year. So this was a huge one. And then I actually rated this 4 stars. And then the shortest book that I read is The Yellow Wallpaper, and this is by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. It is, I think, 15 pages, and it's actually, I'm pretty sure it's the shortest novel ever written, I think. You might have to fact check me on that, but I obviously read it in a very short amount of time, and I loved this book. I wish it was a bigger copy, like a bigger novel, because I rated it 4.75 stars. It was awesome. It was so interesting. It was very kind of like dystopian-like, and it was so fun. Like, obviously you can see literally how thin this is. It, again, is a pretty big book, probably similar sized, like this way, to Barack Obama's A Promised Land. But yeah, this I just got off Amazon, and I highly recommend this sweet, short little read. Okay, so earlier I was saying I rated one of my books 2 stars. Well, that was Pond Water. And it's actually a book that my sisters and I read for our little book club that we're doing. I have 4 sisters, and 4 out of the 5 of us decided to read a book together and kind of start our book club. And we started with Pond Water. I hated it. I feel so bad saying the word hate, but I hated it. There was nothing that I liked about it. If I were reading this on my own, I would have DNF'd it pretty quickly. I thought that the storyline did not flow well. I mean, it was a shorter book. It was like 70 pages or so. But you can still do a good job with a 70-page book. There was a lot crammed into that short amount of time. The timeline didn't make any sense. And it was hard to stay on track with what was what and who was what and all this kind of stuff. I did not like that book at all. And I would definitely not recommend it to anyone. But the one thing is that the money from the book does go to support the woman who wrote it, who has cancer. I think that's the story. I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure that's what it is, because my sister found it on TikTok. But that's why we read it, because we wanted to support this woman who is dealing with cancer or whatever the terminal illness is that she's dealing with. So, like, I guess obviously if you want to support her, buy it, but you could just buy it and you don't have to read it. I would not recommend spending your time reading this book. Next, I have the saddest book that I read this year, and honestly, I cry so easily, and there was a lot of sad books that I read this year, and so I picked a nonfiction and a fiction book. So the nonfiction, I picked The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. Obviously, anybody who knows who Anne Frank is knows that that's going to be a devastating story. It was so well written. I just wish that she had the chance to be an author. I mean, she did get to be, but I wish that she had the chance to live longer and be able to write more stories, because it was an amazing story and I cried for sure. And then a book that I honestly cried more in, which is a fiction book, is A Court of Wings and Ruin. This is the third book in the ACOTAR series, and I was bawling. I actually have an ACOTAR, like reading through the ACOTAR series video, so you can go and click that up above if you want to go and watch that. It does have spoilers, so only watch it if you don't care about spoilers or if you've already read the series. I cried so much reading this, mostly towards the end, like last third or fourth of the book. But wow, it was such a good book. It was amazing. It was sad. It was a sad one. Next we have my new favorite author that I got to read this year, which is Abby Jimenez. I actually read 4 of her books. I have 3 of them though. This was a standalone trilogy that I loved so much. Part of Your World is the first one, and that was my favorite. Yours Truly is the second one. I think, so I know I rated Part of Your World 5 stars. This one, I think I rated like 4.5, 4.75. I think it was 4.5, and then Just for the Summer is the third one that came out in 2024, and I'm pretty sure I rated that 4.75 stars. I love her books. I want to read all of them at some point. She writes such fun, beautiful stories, but tells it in such a deep way and deals with hard issues in a way that makes it easier to learn about, to deal with, kind of thing. I don't know the right way to say that, but yeah, I've loved her books. The 4 books of hers that I have read, they are so good. And now I'm just gonna read down a list of the DNFs that I had this year, and I'm gonna just put the picture over here so that you can see them, but you know, feel free to go check them out on your own. A couple of these I was listening to by audio, so I can specify that, but it wasn't even mostly because of the audio, it was just because I just wasn't enjoying the story. So the first one was Odd Girl Out by Laura James, Excavation by Hannah Mitchell or Michelle. Then we have Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto, Welcome to Night Vale by Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Craner, The Storyteller by Dave Grohl, The Life We Bury by Alan Eskins, and this one people are going to be disappointing me in, but Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I don't know how to say her name. Yeah, so those are my DNFs. The 3 I was listening to by audio was Odd Girl Out, The Storyteller, oh no, there was 4, The Life We Bury, and Jane Eyre. Now we have the books that I read this year that I will reread at some point. So first up, I'm not going to hold the whole series up, but the ACOTAR series, for sure, I will absolutely reread at some point. And the Harry Potter series, which I'm only on book 5 right now. I'm almost done with it, but I love Harry Potter so much and I love this series so much. I know I'm going to reread it again at some point. Then we have Every Last Word by Tamara, how do you say that? Tamara Ireland Stone. I actually rated this book 5 stars. All of these books are rated either 4.75 or 5, and I loved this so much. It was so good. Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. Like I said, it was an amazing book, 5 stars. I want to read this again because I loved the feelings that it gave me and the romance and all of the things. The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. This was also such an awesome book. I love that it's very whimsical and mystical feeling, but there's also love and there's the real life situations that they're dealing with and the connection between the characters, and just the overall story was so much fun. And this is not the only time you're going to see these books in this video, but the Cerulean Chronicles, which is, the first one is The House on the Cerulean Sea, and then we have Somewhere Beyond the Sea, which this one just came out this year. And like, look at how many tabs I have. I loved these books so much. The series was everything to me. I think everybody needs to read it, and I will absolutely read it again. Then we have the most read and least read genres of the year. So my most read genre was contemporary at 21 books this year, and my least read genre was autobiography, which is 1 book, and that 1 book was Paris by Paris Hilton. And it's so hard to pick a favorite book. Like, everybody who reads knows that it's hard to pick a favorite book most of the time. And so I picked a favorite book in just some different genres. So my favorite book in the thriller genre was Verity by Colleen Hoover. It was kind of hard. It was kind of between this and then Never Lie by Frida McFadden, I'm pretty sure. But this book I read earlier this year. It was actually my first more like smut book, first like more just thriller, and I loved it. Also, this cover is so pretty. This is the one with the exclusive chapter. So if you have read Verity but you haven't read the exclusive chapter, either buy this book or go find the exclusive chapter on Reddit, because it is on there, because I found it before I had the book. And this is such a fun, wild thriller. And I hope that when the movie comes out that it's actually, I hope it's good and does it justice, because I'd be excited to see it. My favorite romance was also hard to choose because romance was my second most read category with 20 books in it. And so it was hard to choose, but I loved A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This was the second book in the ACOTAR series, and if you've read it, you know, this is one of the best books. I know this is a lot of people's favorite book, but you gotta read it. You gotta read this series to understand. This is the second one. Read the first one. It's a good book still, but this one is amazing and will change your life. Then for the fantasy section, it is the Harry Potter series, which again, I have not finished yet, but I'm planning to finish it this year, hopefully. We're hoping, fingers crossed. And it's so good. It's so good. I mean, I loved the books, or I loved the movies so much, but reading the books is such an adventure that I've never gotten to experience before, and I love it so much. My favorite book in the contemporary genre, this is the third time you're now seeing this, but Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez is just a great book. I just love it. And my favorite book in the nonfiction, which is another one I've already said, but it is The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. It deserves to be number one. It is such a good book. So then I thought I would talk about the goals that I have / challenges that I have for myself in 2025 when it comes to reading. So since this year I've read just over 60 books. I think next year a good goal for me to have would be 50, because that was actually my goal this year. It was originally 10 books, and then I exceeded that by the time February came, so I upped it to 50. But I just have a feeling I'm going to have less time next year. I know I have some trips planned, and I have a different job now, and all this kind of stuff. And so I think that it might be affected. I thought about doing 40, but I think 50 might be a little bit more of a challenge. And so I'm going to reach for that goal next year. And then some of the other goals that I have are to read the entire Throne of Glass series, which is a lot of books, but I'm excited for it. Then I also would like to read 6 classics, because this year I read 4, so I have some in mind for it, which these are not like set in stone have to, but the ones I'm thinking about are The Handmaid's Tale. This is one I definitely for sure want to read. Then I have The Devil in the White City. This is actually one, my sister gave this to me. She had to read it in school, and so it has all her annotations and stuff, which is really fun. And then I don't have the physical copies of the rest of these, but I plan to read The Hobbit. I actually started it on audio this year, and I wasn't super into it, but I do like the movie, so I decided to just hold off till later on. And then same thing with 1984. That's another one I would like to finish. I started the audio, but I think I would rather read it, the physical copy or a digital. Either way, I want to be reading it instead of listening. I think that I'll retain it better. Then I'd also like to read The Great Gatsby. I've never read that. And same with Anne of Green Gables. I don't even know much about what Anne of Green Gables is, but I know it's a classic and I would just like to read it. Then I plan to read 10 nonfiction books, because in 2024 I read 8. So for that, I have The Body Keeps the Score. This is one I actually have had pretty much this whole year and haven't read yet. My therapist recommended it to me, and I think it would be super beneficial. I have Remembering Slavery, which is a book that I got, I think it was at like a library event where they were getting rid of old books, and I would like to read this. Tuesdays with Morrie is the next one, and I saw this recommended by, oh my gosh, I just blanked on her name. I'm going to put it down here because I cannot think of her name. But she recommended it, and I really like her recommendations, and it just seems like a really great book. It's rated so highly. This is another book that I got at the library event. This is Dreams from My Father by Barack Obama, and I just really like the Obamas. I really look up to them. I think that they are wonderful people, and I would really like to read this book. And then I don't have the copies of most of the rest of these, but we have Into Thin Air, which is the book about the one guy on Mount Everest. I can't think of it, but it sounds like a super interesting story. Then I have The Woman in Me, which is about Britney Spears and her life. And then Sundown Towns, which my sister recommended to me. Then I have Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, which is a book that my therapist also recommended to me. And then this one my husband has, so I might listen to it on audio because I like listening to these types of books on audio, but I like to read Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey on audiobook most likely. And then I'd also like to read the autobiography of Malcolm X. That is 10 books, but then my husband asked me to add in another book to read. So the 11th nonfiction book that I will plan to read is Why So Serious, which is the untold story of NBA champion Nikola Jokic. And if you don't know who that is, he is a Denver Nuggets player. He is probably the best basketball player. He's definitely the best NBA player alive right now. Possibly ever. And we love watching the Denver Nuggets. We're huge Denver Nuggets fans, and so I think this would be a really cool book to read. And then there are just some other books that I would like to read next year. The rest of the Red Rising series, which is 3 more books in the series. I read the initial trilogy, and then there's 3 more books, and he's writing another one, which I think will be the last one. Then I would also like to read the Dune series, which is one that I had planned to read this year, but I just didn't end up getting to it. I didn't want to prioritize it, so I hope to read that next year. I would really like to read Wicked. I have now seen the movie twice, and I love it so much. And I know that the book is very different from the movie. I know that it has a lot of trigger warnings. There's a lot of intense stuff that happens. I think that I would handle that stuff fairly well. I enjoy really dark stories, basically, so I think that I would enjoy that one. Then I plan to read Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow. One of my friends gave me her copy of the book, and so I was going to try to read it before the end of the year, but that's not happening, so that's probably going to be a January read for me. And another January read is going to be The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, and this is one my grandma recommended to me. Kristen Hanna is her favorite author. And my sisters and I, after we finished reading Pondwater, we said, what book are we going to read next? And we're going to do The Nightingale. So I think that's going to be a goal to maybe try to finish that by the end of January. And then I'd really like to read Butcher and Blackbird, which I know is also a quite smutty book and a quite intense book with a lot of trigger warnings as well. Again, I think that I would enjoy the book. I know there's a second one as well. I think it's called Leather and Lark. So I definitely want to read that. And then the last book that I plan to prioritize reading, which I guess is technically there's 2 books, is Better Than the Movies. And I had planned to read that this year as well, just didn't get to it. And then there's a second book that came out this past year, so I plan to read both of them. That seems like a good maybe spring or summer book, so that's kind of what I'm planning to read sometime in that time of year in 2025. So as you can tell, my books slowly started moving out farther and farther, but I just wanted to thank you all so much for watching and for being here. This has been such a great year on YouTube. It has now been 2 or 3 years on YouTube, and I really enjoy it. I have loved posting book content this year. This is my first year really being a reader and posting book videos, so I hope that you enjoy these because they're not going to stop. And I love reading and I love books. And again, if you want to see my book reading journey, you can follow my Goodreads or my Story Graph. They're both linked in the description below. And I also just wanted to say real quick, thanks to Sarah Caroli on YouTube for her video she did last year. I took a lot of these ideas from her video and I added a couple of my own to make this. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed. I hope you have a wonderful new year and an even more awesome 2025. Bye.